welcome to the Advisor Advocates podcast. My name is Garrett Lill. I'm a certified financial planner and former advisor, and I started Advisor Advocates in this podcast to share with other advisors some of the experience that I like to say I accidentally accumulated over the course of my 13-year career, especially around the areas of the industry involving transitions from one firm to the other, advisor recruiting, M&A deals, things of that nature. Interesting thing for advisors that I've experienced in my career is that advisors are often on an island. We don't really know what's out there. We don't know what's going on outside the walls of our firm and outside the confines of our own practices. Especially when I was working in the recruiting industry and talking with advisors, there were just so many advisors who didn't know what they didn't know. So the purpose of this podcast and Advisor Advocates is to help bridge that information gap, to help advisors understand a little bit more about what the landscape looks like out there, what options are available to you, and sort of share some of the insights that I've run into and hopefully answer some of the most common questions that advisors have. Joining me today, I have the esteemed privilege of having Doug Kisker joining me. Doug is one of the, and I do mean this sincerely, one of the finest gentlemen that I've met in the wealth management industry over the last couple of years. I love your candor. You're as straightforward of a shooter as you'll ever come across. So I appreciate you joining me. Doug is the founder of Fidant Wealth Partners. You're based out of Cincinnati. Is that the home base?
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Garrett. Glad to help out.
So, I want to kind of tee things off a little bit here. Just give me a little bit of your backstory. I know I know where you're at now. You manage a huge team in multiple states, and you've obviously gotten to a great point in your career. But kind of give me the background on sort of how you got here. What was your path?
Yeah, the quick front end of the path was I was a tennis pro and needed to make a living. So, I spent a few years at an office equipment company called Pitney Bowes, and that was successful, but you were limited in territory. And one of the predecessors to what now is Ameriprise approached me and said, you can do what you do any place. I said, sign me up. Little did I know what it meant to build your own business. And, where we were 30 years ago in this industry and in this business and where we are today is certainly night and day. Many of us seasoned advisors did the cold calls, worked from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. to build this business one client at a time. And now the opportunity to have a business where you have strong advisors, strong team members that help you to conduct that business is an amazing place to be. And certainly that's where we are as Fidant Wealth Partners. I've been doing this over 30 years. I don't do cold calls anymore. I talk with advisors and team members and referrals to build our business through an outstanding team. And that's where my focus has been, Garrett. It's building a team. And, when it comes to being successful and growing a business, it's a team that it takes.
So what your comments there kind of reminded me when I was probably first or second year in the business, a veteran advisor said if they had known how hard it was going to be, they would have never started it. Would you echo that? I kind of hear that even though you're not saying it.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, looking back, you look backward and you remember what you did to get it to where it is, and you are happy you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And certainly technology in the industry has changed such that the way you built the business 30 years ago is not possible today. So, learning to work with clients that have commitments to relationships and making sure those relationships carry on to the next generation, both in the advisor world and in the client world, is the business.
One of the really cool things that I enjoy about working with you, I mean, so regular listeners to the show and those who know me, and you certainly know this, I was an advisor for the majority of my career. And then as I started to work in the area that I'm in now, I learned there were a lot of different firms out there with a lot of different approaches to growing their business and a lot of different approaches to what they were going to offer advisors to join their team. And many of those have, very specific set of boxes that they want checked in order for someone to be the right fit. And one of the cool things that I enjoy about working with you and different conversations we've had is that you certainly have some boxes, right? And everybody's going to have some boxes. You need to have some type of definition around who's the right fit for your team and who's not. That being said, your general response that I get from you is you're always up for a conversation and everything is somewhat negotiable. And I don't mean that in a too broad of a sense, but you're a very open-minded group when it comes to growth and looking for ways it can be structured. And so I say that as the backdrop for the question. I wanted to ask the question, what types of advisors are the best fit with Fidant, and what types of individuals have you found that tend to fit best in that culture? But I also wanted to ask that in a way that's not asking you to check boxes, because I know at the end of the day that there are a few certain characteristics that you're looking for in your team, and a few common threads that are going to run throughout the Fidant bloodstream, if you will. But if those core qualities are present, you also have a lot of flexibility in terms of the execution of that and how best to onboard them, if that's maybe saying it the right way. So what are some of those common threads of the DNA that all your team members seem to have?
Yeah. Team player, first of all. This is a team. This is a family, as it were. I mean, I've been married to my wonderful wife now 10 plus years. I've been married to my operations director for 24. So we're a family, we're a team. And the entry into this has to fit our culture of family, team, and of course, client care. Outside of that, the next steps are, the business is about delivering high quality advice, not just investments, but high quality advice to clients. And if you get those two to match up, you can find the place where other pieces come together, in joining an organization. Fidant is its own organization. We run our own business. We clear through Ameriprise because they're the best at what they do. They have the best technology. They care about their clients. And, I would put what is out there is what I tell my team members and clients is, my team has the heart of a social worker. We would do this for free. We can't, because we have the mind of a capitalist. So when you take the heart of a social worker and you combine it with the mind of a capitalist, you can get great results. The two work at each other all the time, but that's what creates success, is that push and pull between heart of a social worker and the mind of a capitalist. And I think if anybody talked to any of my team members, and I would say to any of your viewers, if you're building a team, it's about your team. It's about the quality of your team. It's about the growth of your team, because the human condition is to grow. It is not to be the same thing over and over and over. So to paint that picture of growth, to deliver on growth, and to make everybody feel like they're a part of that growth causes people to want to join in on that opportunity.
Yeah, and I always use the word. I think I try not to pigeonhole too much in what I do, but I do find that over time you start to develop categories, and you start to notice some common threads in different categories, and then maybe you sort of accidentally back into some groupings. And I find the term growth-minded individual to be one that seems to always resonate when I'm talking with someone. I don't necessarily know how to define a growth-minded individual, but I do know it when I see it. And when I talk to somebody, I can pretty quickly tell, oh yeah, Doug is going to really hit it off with this type of person. But it is that I would say maybe as one way to try to define that, the advisor who is comfortable where they're at, they want to work 20 hours a week and play golf, play tennis, do different things, and kind of they're sort of past the I want to work hard and grow my business phase. You can tell me if I'm wrong with this. I don't think that necessarily disqualifies them for Fidant, but Fidant probably is not the best landing spot for an advisor like that, because you seem to have, from the outside looking in, a culture that supports and incentivizes growth. It doesn't mandate it, maybe. I've never heard you talk about sales quotas or anything like that, but you've created an infrastructure to say, we've I don't know. It's kind of like joining a successful college football team. We're getting into football season right now. It's kind of like going to Alabama and playing quarterback and saying, I want to pass for 1,200 yards. We've built something that can help you do far more than that. If that's all you want to do, you're probably, it may not be the right fit. Is that a fair way to summarize? I don't want to make it sound like you guys are just greedy pigs and all you do is go out and grow. But you've created the engine for it. And usually the most successful advisors for you are going to be the ones who are going to properly utilize that.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Garrett, to put me in a discussion where you're discussing Alabama football. To use a great term, that's pretty high cotton. So thank you for that. You can't stay the same or you'll shrink. Now that doesn't mean you need to be hyper focused on growth. What I tell team members every year, what I tell potential folks that would like to join our team is, and this sounds trite, but it is true. You tell me what you want to accomplish, and I'm going to help you accomplish it until such time as either you accomplish it or you tell me I don't want to do that anymore. So, and what do you want for yourself is what the driver is. So Fidant has the ability to put a turbocharger behind somebody who wants to really become that next something in their life, whether it's an operations team member or an advisor, because it works both ways. But if it's somebody who says, I just need support, I want time in my life, I want to be able to do the things I want to do, we've built the support team that enables that to happen. Now, I don't want you to shrink, but I don't need you to have a turbocharger behind you either. So, a team is built to support that which an advisor wants for themselves. And that's the key, is what do you want? Are you sure you want that? And if that's what you want, let's structure a means by which that happens. Is that kind of, Alabama football probably doesn't look at it that way. You go out and hit somebody and you better be a winner. And I define winning as what do you want for yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, because I'm trying to think how I'm trying to say this. I know you well enough to know, and have had enough conversations with you enough to know what the real answer is in the context of what's probably going to land being around a 30-minute episode of a podcast. How do I get that out and help that to shine can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But I know that there are a lot of firms out there that use the word growth as a synonym for greed, or a euphemism for greed, maybe is the way I would put that. And I know that that's not what I hear from Fidant. You know what I mean? I've seen enough and talked to you enough that it's not greed. But there are people out there who have a genuine desire to grow their practices. They're just not quite where they want to be yet. That could be a $400,000 producer who wants to get to $1 million. It could be a $900,000 producer who wants to get to $1 million or $2 million. But that advisor who has an appetite for growth, for whatever the reason, tends to really gravitate more towards your story than others do. And again, I didn't want it to come across as greed, and you did a great job, I think, of explaining that the team is built to support the advisor's goals, and building it around those goals. Now, for every advisor, that's not to double their business, and that doesn't mean that they're excluded from the team, right? You've built things for every type of advisor, or have that structure to support all types of advisors. So I think I thought you explained that well. I want to ask you about this just a little bit, and this is I might be putting you on the spot. This was not in our pre-show questions, but I think it's a good opportunity to do this. You mentioned Ameriprise, and I know you speak very fondly of Ameriprise. We've had this conversation candidly between us where you say, hey, you're an independent business. You could be anywhere with your practice. You could take your business anywhere. You choose to be with Ameriprise, not because you're under contract or under any type of force to do that. You believe they're the best fit for your practice. I wanted to ask you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because one of the things that I find in what I do, and this is not picking on Ameriprise, every business out there, and I'm not going to name any other specific names because they're not on the call, and I wouldn't want to make anybody mad. But if you've seen a commercial for a firm, then they all run into the same problem of having a preconceived notion that advisors are going to have, good or bad. There are going to be some advisors that I talk to that are going to say, Ameriprise, I'm not going to. I don't want to go to Ameriprise. Period. They've made that decision. And others are going to say the same thing about 10 of Ameriprise's competitors. And some are going to say, "Oh, I would like to hear more about Ameriprise." So the point of teeing that up, I guess, is I think a lot of times what happens is advisors can get that they arrive at that preconceived notion from information they had 15 years ago, and it just stays rooted there, right?
True.
But that's really not fair, because a lot of the things that you thought 15 years ago aren't true today. So all of that really, really long question is just to say, elaborate a little bit more on why you think Ameriprise is the best fit for your practice, and maybe shed some light on some maybe myths that might still be floating around from 15 years ago about Ameriprise?
Yeah, again, I have the virtue of time and vision looking backward. So, I'll start off by saying Ameriprise from top to bottom is loaded with talent. And I've been fortunate enough with the success Fidant has had to meet with senior leaders all the way up to CEO of this company. And they all are extremely talented. And if one opens their ears and listens to the direction and the understanding and the research and what they look to deliver to the advisor group, it's all about talent up there. And that's amazing. Garrett, I'm sure you would understand as well as anybody of your viewers. In a large practice, you get solicited by every other broker dealer out there, every RIA opportunity that one can imagine. Yet I stay. So why? Culture, they care about the client. Second, technology. 10 years ago, I would not have ever said Ameriprise was a leader in technology and the implementation of it. Today, bold statement, I don't think you could find anybody who's got stronger technology, but the best implementation of that technology, including artificial intelligence. We've been using AI for a number of years. It's not a new term.
Mm-hmm.
We know what it is. We know how to use it. And as evidence to those two things, that allows you to then have a growth culture. And again, that heart of a social worker and a mind of a capitalist pervades this group of people, this Ameriprise firm. We are not the company of old. We are not a captured company. We are not soloed to a set of funds or a set of insurance. We have a broader capacity than I can even keep up with. And that's not me saying that. That's the team members that some you've introduced, some I've found that have come to join us that say, we never had access to this stuff.
Yeah.
High quality, culture, talent. It's a terrific firm. It's as good or better than anything on the street. I would tell you it's the best on the street. I haven't found one better. And I get to look. Anybody will talk to me. If I call the number and I say, I'm interested, they'll talk to me. And I've seen it. And the grass isn't greener.
Well, and full disclosure to anybody who's listening, like I'm not paid a cent to promote Ameriprise, and I'm not here to try. This is not an Ameriprise sponsored show, and I'm not here to endorse Ameriprise. But I've heard you speak incredibly fondly of Ameriprise, and always, I think my goal in the show and everything that we do with Advisor Advocates is objective truth above all else. And I think that from what I've heard from you and others in that. You're not the only one who's told me that Ameriprise has changed for the better a lot, in the last decade and a half. So, did want to give that a few minutes to shine some light on it. So, one of the really first things that you and I started working on together a couple of years ago, you were sharing with me. I always like to ask the firms this question when I start to work with them. What's the one thing that I need to know about your firm? What's the one? Because everybody has the. I got so sick of hearing the same thing: great culture, great payouts, and industry-leading technology stack. That was the same answer to the what's your value prop to advisors? It was always the same three things, right? But one of the things that I think kind of differentiated you early on in our conversations a couple of years ago is your glide path to succession and the way you've approached those opportunities as a specific niche for you. Now, again, I circle back to what I said a minute ago. That isn't to say that if you're not an advisor that's at the tail end of your career looking to sell, finance is not right for you. You have the ability to work with a myriad of different types of advisors in different stages of their career. But you do have a specific approach to advisors who may be towards the end of their career. They're not ready to sell right this second necessarily, or at the very least, even if they're starting the transaction now, they're not looking for here's a check and have a nice day kind of approach. They're maybe still growing their business for a few more years before their eventual exit. And I know it's something you've had a lot of success with. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing a little bit of that and how you've approached it and some success stories. I know you've had several of those.
Yeah. I have yet to meet any advisor that said, Doug, I'm ready to sell tomorrow. It's always, hey, I'm looking forward in the next few years and give me a call in a few years. And that pushed me to be thinking about, well, what you don't want to have happen and what happens, and this is statistics measured over and over and over. Once one reaches that I'm out of here in next 3 to 5 years, a practice has peaked and it starts to tilt the other way by either behavior or age of client. I mean, so what you want to do is, in my mind, with a glide path understanding, was to catch that practice right as it's peaking and put the support behind it that lets it keep going, that makes it an extremely viable asset when that individual is ready to transition. And then secondly, it makes the transition so smooth because, my background with Ameriprise in years past was as a new advisor development leader and a seasoned advisor development leader for about 8 years. And so we hire those junior advisors, we grow them, we prepare them so that when that glide path opportunity presents itself, we've got that junior advisor to put with it so that that trajectory doesn't tip over. It continues to grow. Why is that important? One, it takes care of the client. It's a comfortable movement. Two, it preserves the value of that advisor's practice. It might even grow the value of that advisor's practice in that transition rather than waiting till it tips over the other way and you don't get what you built as comfortably as you wanted to. Even in this market today, while there's lots of people that are willing to purchase, there's not a lot of people that are prepared to support that transition in the manner that we can. So Fidant is constantly building that junior advisor ranks through a number of strategies. So when those glide path opportunities present themselves, we can match them up and keep that growth pattern. And I would tell you, outside of one, I think I've done 8 or 9 glide path transitions. Every one of them was worth more 3 to 5 years later than on the original valuation date when they joined the team, because of the support we give, because of the junior advisor, and because the transition is smooth as all get out that way. You produce more by working less. That's kind of ideal. And that's the idea of a glide path: is start your glide, let us take up the slack, get the growth that can continue, and get paid for it on the back end. And it is very successful. It allows for that individual to see that sunset but not have it be midnight.
One of the things that when I sold my business, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I think that as I've started to do more and more of what I'm doing now, I found out that I'm not the only one who didn't know these same things. But I think the perception that I had was that selling your advisory business was very similar in terms of the execution as selling a stock. There's a point in time where we sell it, we get a value on that day, and that's it. And then we walk away. And there may be I knew there was a transition period of some sort, but for the most part, the pricing was all kind of locked in on that one day. And, as an advisor, you're trying to time that just right to get the best multiple at a time that revenues are the highest and whatnot. Well, that's not the best way of doing it. And as I've learned more and more recently, that's not the common practice, but I do think that's still the common perception of some advisors. But I did another episode, and some of the viewers may have seen this one. I'm not holding it against you if you haven't seen this one, but I did an episode on how valuable is your practice, or what's your practice, where I walked through all these different variables, and basically what you arrive at is, and this wasn't done intentionally to flatter you by any means, but what you arrive at the end of this episode is, if you want to maximize the value of your practice, it looks pretty doggone much like what you're describing, the glide path, where an advisor gets some upfront compensation, but not all of it. And then over some period of 3 to 5 years, the advisor sticks around as a part of the team that acquired the practice and works with them through that transition, and then is compensated as a revenue share payout based on the size of the practice. And what that does is it aligns the interests so much between the buyer and the seller, so that, if I'm the advisor who's trying to maximize the value of my deal on day one, and I get max cash to me, well, I'm asking you to take all the risks that the market goes down, clients leave, I would jerk and go down the street and compete with you, whatever. If you don't give me any cash up front, well, then I'm taking all the risks that you're going to wrong me somehow in the transaction. But in a pure glide path, the way you're describing it, where it's aligning those interests, we're on the same team. We want to see a smooth transition for my clients that are going to have these relationships that I've worked with for decades, are going to continue to be taken care of. And we both want to see the practice continue to thrive and grow and be successful. And you can land at a spot where you make 25, 30, 50% more total on the sale of your practice going this approach as opposed to taking the 3x cash up front and calling it a day, because you can see that practice grow and participate with that. So I applaud what you're doing, and I guess I'm saying that entire little monologue to say that you may call it something a little bit different than what I had in my mind as I was building that spreadsheet out, but you're doing the exact same, you're following the same structure that I followed when I sold my business. Because I wasn't quite ready to just cash in at that point. I did want to see it participate in some of that growth if it continued. And I thought it was a very practical way of doing it. And for the advisors who do buy into that type of an approach and work with the buyer of their practice to maximize the value of it, it's a win-win-win all the way around. Best for the firms, best for the advisors, and most of all, best for the clients, which is the one that everyone cares about.
It has worked out in almost all cases, some to a greater extent than others, but the medium level success story. I had an advisor, about a $400,000 producer, wanted to be done in 5 years. We came to an agreement on how to glide path that out. We did a evaluation on the front end. I bought into a significant portion of it, less than 50%, but a significant portion. And when he was ready to be finished 5 years later, that was a $1.2 million book with a valuation on the remaining part. You think he's a happy guy? Yeah, real happy. So not only did he get the benefit of the growth because of the support and the focus, but then he got the benefit of the upped valuation. I got the benefit of buying it in on a portion of it at an earlier price and put the support and the win-win behind it to make it grow. And that's that same tipping point that I was talking about just a minute ago, that you want to catch it at that point, and you can create great success in the right situation. And it puts everybody on the same side of the table.
I've grown to maybe categorize the advisor market in almost three camps. You've got the employee producing advisor who comes in, W-2 employee, benefits, the whole nine yards, has everything provided, supported. Payouts are going to be 40 to 50% typically for those types of advisors. Then there's this middle ground of independence where I call it an independent tuck-in, but there's different terminology, I guess, that can be used depending on where you're at, where the advisor technically owns their book of business and is a 1099 producer for the firm that they're a part of. Typically, I see payouts in that 70 to 80% ballpark for the producing advisor. And then there's obviously the totally independent, which is sort of where Fidant is right now, where you're an independent practice. You're going to be netting somewhere in the 90 to 100% of revenue, or before you start to pay your expenses. Is there obviously that it's hard for you to carve out any pie for another Fidant in your pie. So somebody who wants to have their own totally independent team, that's not really a conversation for it. Obviously, succession planning is a separate type of transaction. But I know that you have opportunities on the W-2 side, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll cut this out if I'm wrong, but you do have a mechanism or a way that you can support somebody who wants to sort of plug into the Fidant brand but doesn't necessarily want everything. They still want to have sort of their own team of that, or are you strictly just employees?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There is a means to have a 1099 relationship. There's a means to have a sub-running team where we're advising through the operational side or through the leadership growth side. My entire firm has an equity share plan, pre-written, top producing individuals, if they want to be a part of the equity growth of this firm, you can merge someone else's equity in. Equity can be awarded by top performance, and individuals can choose to buy into that overall piece. So regardless of where that plug-in point is, there, in a great fit, which is all we're after each time, is a great fit. All of that is available right now. I mean, it's not like I got to go design it. It's designed and able to be run. There are pros and cons to either one. And as you know, Garrett, I will tell anybody I talk to, here's what I see, here's how I see it works, here's what you need to be aware of, here's what will make it work, here's what will not what will make it not work, and let's talk about that. because you want to be, as you put, eyes wide open in any discussion and in any transaction. And I think that's what makes this work well with the Fidant Wealth Partners is we've looked 360 degrees around what it takes to build success, and we have the ability to plug and play that where somebody's, what do you want for yourself?
Well, if you're an advisor who has watched the 30 minutes and change of this, I will tell you that you now know the same Doug that I know. You're the same. I've never seen a second side of you. You are who you are. You're as straightforward of a shooter as I've ever met. And I say this a lot too, and I do mean it genuinely. You have the rare ability to be honest without being rude. You know, like it's a hard talent to have, but you never say anything you don't mean, but you're never rude about it either. You just lay it straight out, and if it's very refreshing. And I think for advisors who are interested in the conversation, but they're not quite sure if maybe the answer to their question wasn't quite addressed on this podcast, well, they can always sit down and chat with you, and you will give them a straight answer to that very quickly. There's no games, no misdirection. To go back to the Alabama football, we're not running reverses here. It's pretty straightforward. Hand the ball off up the middle, and what you see is what you get. So I appreciate you sharing your story, and just enjoy the conversation. It's always a pleasure, and thanks for taking some time to chat with me.
Garrett, it has been a great pleasure of ours and mine particularly to get to know you and work with you, and we will obviously continue that working relationship. And this industry is just hitting its stride in the next 20 years of opportunity, and if structured right, there's an immense amount of success out there to be had. We're glad to play a part of it for those that want to be a part of that success.
For advisors out there, if you are interested in a conversation with Doug, my email address, phone number, website, all that stuff will be in the description, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, advisoradvocates.com, theadvisoradvocates.com. Feel free to reach out to me whatever way is most convenient and comfortable for you. We can have a conversation, and if it sounds like we should pass along the information to Doug and have another conversation with him, we can certainly help put that together. That's part of my job and what I love to do. So thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Real pleasure, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Garrett.